"Why are you still alive?" my dad asked in shock when I appeared at my sister's wedding. The words came out sharp, louder than he meant, and the whole room froze. His face drained of color, his mouth slightly open like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Every eye turned toward me. My sister stood frozen at the front, her bouquet slipping in her grip. My mother stared hard at the floor, clutching her glass as if holding on to it would make me disappear. Ethan, standing beside my sister in his suit, tensed the moment his gaze landed on me. His lips pressed into a tight line, and I caught the flicker of panic cross his face. They had all believed I was gone. They had let the world believe it too. For them, it was easier to erase me than to face what they had done. But I wasn't gone. I hadn't disappeared. And walking into that room was proof they couldn't deny. The guests shifted uncomfortably, whispering, glancing between me and the family at the front. Nobody came forward. It was as if I carried something dangerous with me, like my presence alone cracked the picture-perfect story they'd sold to everyone. My father's eyes burned with something between anger and fear. He had declared me dead to him once, and now here I was, standing tall, breathing, looking straight at him. He wasn't shocked that I existed. He was shocked that I'd had the strength to come back. Corinne's painted smile faltered, her jaw tight as she tried to keep composure. She had always been the golden one, the one they praised, the one who could do no wrong. But now her eyes cut through me, sharp and cold, as though she wanted me to disappear all over again. On what was supposed to be her perfect day, I had ruined everything without saying a single word. I didn't rush to explain myself. I let the silence do the work. My steps echoed as I moved further inside, slow and steady, refusing to look away. The whispers rose behind me, the tension thick enough to choke on. For years, I had carried the weight of being unwanted, of being told I was nothing. They had thought I would never recover, never return, never dare show up again. But here I was, living proof that they hadn't broken me. Their faces told me more than words ever could. My father's disbelief, my mother's shame, my sister's rage, Ethan's guilt, it all spilled into the open. They wanted me erased, forgotten. Instead, I had come back stronger, and in that moment, I knew the truth. I didn't need to say much at all. My being there was enough to unravel everything. And I wasn't leaving. I grew up in a house that looked perfect from the outside. Big yard, tall white pillars, everything polished and neat. But behind the walls, it never felt like home. My father, Gerald, believed rules were more important than people. He spoke like his word was law, and when he was in the room, everyone adjusted themselves to keep him pleased. My mother, Elaine, moved quietly around him. She never argued, never stepped in when things turned harsh. Her way of coping was to pretend nothing was wrong. Then there was Corinne, my sister. She was the kind of child people admired the moment they met her. She had bright eyes, soft hair, and a smile that made adults say, "What a sweet girl." She learned quickly how to use that charm. She could spill juice on the rug and get laughter in return, while if I left a single shoe out of place, I got a lecture about respect and discipline. It didn't take long for me to notice the difference in how we were treated. When Corinne brought home drawings from school, they were pinned to the fridge like they belonged in a gallery. When I brought home mine, Dad barely looked and said, "Try harder next time." If Corinne forgot to do a chore, Mom would cover for her, saying she was tired or busy. If I forgot, it was proof I was lazy. At dinner, Gerald asked Corinne about her day, listened to every detail, nodded proudly when she told him about a spelling test or a role in a school play. When it was my turn, his eyes often wandered back to his plate, and his answers were short. I learned not to expect attention. I tried to fight for space, for a little recognition, but it always turned back on me. If Corinne teased me, I was told to stop being dramatic. If she borrowed my things without asking, I was told I should be generous. If I raised my voice, I was the problem. Over time, I stopped speaking up. Silence was easier than being told again that I was wrong. Corinne thrived in that house. She knew how to tilt her head just right, how to flatter Dad with a compliment about his suit, how to smile at Mom and ask for small favors that added up. I watched her carefully, almost like studying a language I could never quite master. She wore their love like a crown, while I carried their disappointment like a weight on my back. People outside our family never saw it. To the world, we were fortunate, but I knew the truth. From the start, I was the shadow in the corner, the child who could never shine bright enough. The lines were drawn early. Corinne was the golden one, and I was the one who would always fall short. And in that unfair balance, the first cracks of betrayal began to grow. College was the first time I thought I had something of my own, something no one could take away. Ethan Ward came into my life when I was still figuring out who I was. He was kind, patient, the first person who looked at me like I mattered. With him, I felt seen in a way I had never felt at home. We spent hours talking about our future, walking across campus hand in hand, laughing in a way that made the world feel lighter. For the first time, I believed love could be mine. What I didn't know was that while I was falling deeper, my sister was circling closer. Corinne visited campus often, always with some excuse. Shopping nearby, dropping off something for me, wanting to check in. At first, I didn't question it. She was my sister, after all. But I started noticing how her eyes lingered on Ethan, how her laughter came too quick at his jokes, how she leaned in just a little too close. I brushed it off. She was charming with everyone, and Ethan was mine. I told myself I was being insecure. Then I started catching the little signs. Her text messages popping up on his phone when he thought I wasn't looking. The way she remembered details about his classes that I hadn't even told her. Still, I clung to trust. I wanted to believe Ethan loved me enough to see through her game. The truth came out in the harshest way. I walked into a coffee shop near campus one afternoon and saw them together. Not as friends, not as siblings-in-law to be, but leaning close, speaking softly, his hand brushing hers like it belonged there. My heart dropped before they even noticed me. When they did, Ethan's face was guilty, Corinne's smug. She didn't even flinch, just gave me that practiced sweet smile, the one that always fooled everyone else. I confronted them both, shaking, words spilling out before I could stop them. Ethan stumbled through excuses, claiming it wasn't what it looked like, but the look in his eyes told me everything. Corinne didn't bother denying it. She looked me straight in the face and said, "Boys always choose the prettier one." I wanted to believe my parents would stand by me, that they'd finally see how cruel she was. But when the truth reached them, they didn't scold her. They didn't tell Ethan to stay away. My father only shrugged and said, "Well, he made his choice." My mother tried to soothe me, saying, "Don't be jealous, Marin. It's not Corinne's fault he prefers her." Their words cut deeper than anything Ethan or Corinne had done. It wasn't just losing him, it was losing the hope that my family would ever see me as worthy. That day, something in me cracked. I couldn't breathe in that house anymore, couldn't stand the sight of their approving smiles toward her while I broke apart. So I pulled back. I kept my distance, telling myself maybe with time things would change, maybe they'd realize how wrong they'd been. But in my heart, I knew the truth. The people I trusted most had chosen her side, and I was standing alone. It was only a few months after the truth about Ethan and Corinne came out when my father called us all together. He did it the way he always did, demanded everyone's presence at the dining table, like it was some kind of court session. His voice was calm, but I could feel something sharp underneath it. When we sat down, he didn't waste time. He cleared his throat and said he was making changes to his will. I felt my stomach twist before he even explained. He went on, his words steady, as if he had rehearsed them. "From this day forward, Marin is no longer included in any part of the inheritance. You've brought nothing but shame to this family. I won't leave you a dime." The silence that followed was crushing. I waited for my mother to speak up, to tell him he was being too harsh. She just looked down at her hands, twisting the rings on her finger like she wanted to disappear into the chair. Corinne, sitting across from me, smirked ever so slightly, as if this was the outcome she had been waiting for. And then Ethan, bold as ever, rested his hand on hers. It was the first time they had openly shown themselves as a couple in front of me. No more sneaking, no more pretending. They flaunted it like I didn't exist, like I had never been part of Ethan's life at all. Corinne lifted her chin, her diamond ring catching the light as she made sure I saw it. Their engagement was no longer a rumor, it was a fact. I tried to keep my voice steady when I asked my father how he could do this, how he could erase me so easily. His eyes were cold like stone. He told me I had embarrassed the family with my outbursts, that I wasn't dependable, that I was ungrateful. Every word pushed me further away, like he was stripping the last bit of belonging I had left. Finally, I snapped. I told them the shame wasn't mine, that it was his for turning a blind eye, my mother's for staying silent, Corinne's for stabbing her own sister in the back, and Ethan's for betraying me. My voice shook, but I didn't hold back. That was when my father slammed his hand on the table and shouted, "You're dead to me." His words weren't a slip. He meant them. He looked at me as though I had already been buried. The room spun for a moment, and then everything inside me went quiet. There was nothing left to say. I pushed back my chair, stood up, and walked out the front door without another word. No one followed me. No one tried to stop me. I left that night with no money, no home, and no family to return to. To them, I had vanished. They told themselves I no longer existed, and in their world, that was true. From that day forward, I was erased from their lives. And though I was still breathing, still moving, to them, I had disappeared completely. Morning light found me in the driver's seat again, my pillow a folded jacket, the steering wheel cold under my hand. I woke stiff and sore, every bone heavy like I had been carrying weights in my sleep. The car smelled faintly of last night's coffee and the takeout box I hadn't thrown away. I checked my phone out of habit and saw more missed calls from unknown numbers. No messages from the people who used to call me daughter. Days blurred into one long list of tasks. I worked at a diner from dawn, where I washed plates and refilled coffee pots until my fingers cracked from the heat and the soap. I picked up an evening shift cleaning an office building, pushing a mop until my back ached. On weekends, I took temp work in a warehouse, hauling boxes that left bruises on my arms. The jobs paid little, but they paid enough for gasoline and for a cheap dinner now and then. Sleep came in short pieces, an hour here, 2 hours there, always with the fear that someone would see the car where I had parked and know how little I had left. My body began to protest. I had constant headaches that throbbed behind my eyes. My teeth ached from the cold and from stress. Once, I fainted in an alley behind the diner and woke up with a bruise on my temple and a man pouring water over my hand. I told myself it was nothing, that I could keep going. When the cough started deep and wet, I ignored it until a coworker handed me a cheap thermometer and said, "You should see a doctor." I could not afford a doctor. I could barely afford to put gas in the car. No one from my old life checked on me. No one called to ask if I had eaten. I learned to answer the empty silence by pretending it didn't matter. But it did. Some nights the silence felt loud enough to press on my chest. I thought of what it would be like to have someone knock on the car window and say, "Are you all right?" That knock never came. One afternoon, while I was folding laundry at the laundromat, I heard 2 women talking about me. They did not know I was there. "I heard she's not right in the head," one said. The other answered, "Yeah, some people say she's probably not even alive anymore." The words slid through me like ice. I felt both invisible and exposed, like my life had become a rumor people repeated to make themselves feel safer. There were smaller humiliations, the kind that stick, having to ask for extra change from a cashier because the pump wouldn't accept my card, sleeping through a morning because I had worked until dawn and my body gave up, being laughed at by someone who remembered my old name and now looked past me like I was nothing. I wept once in the passenger seat, the tears hot and pointless, and then wiped my face with the back of my hand and steeled myself. I hit a point where giving up would have been the easier choice. I knew what surrender looked like, and I almost let it take me. But I could not allow their version of me to be the last one. I would not give them the spectacle of my failure. I drove to a dollar store and bought a cheap notebook and a pen. That small purchase felt like a promise. I began to count coins in a change jar each night, planning one step at a time. I did not know how I would climb out, only that I would. I would not let them say they had finished me. The first real step out of the hole was the hardest. I took night classes at a community college, working during the day to pay for them. The hours were brutal, but for the first time I felt like I was moving forward instead of just trying to stay alive. Books filled the back seat of my car, highlighters scattered across the dashboard. I read chapters during lunch breaks and studied flashcards while waiting for the bus. Slowly, I pieced together credits, one semester at a time, until I was accepted into a nursing program. Nursing school pushed me harder than anything else had. There were days I thought I would collapse from exhaustion, working shifts, then staying up until dawn memorizing anatomy or running through practice lab. But every time I slipped, I reminded myself I had already survived worse. The lectures, the exams, the long clinical hours in hospitals, all of it was fuel. Instead of breaking me, it built me. When I finally graduated, I held the certificate in my hand and felt something I hadn't felt in years, proof that I could create my own future. Not long after, I found work as a trauma nurse. The pace was fast, chaotic at times, but it gave me purpose. In the middle of emergencies, with lives hanging in the balance, I realized I had become someone capable, someone strong enough to be trusted with the most fragile moments of others. Patients thanked me, families gripped my hand in gratitude, and for once, I wasn't invisible. Along the way, I met people who saw me for who I truly was. Not the black sheep, not the forgotten daughter, not the rumor that I was unstable. My coworkers, classmates, and neighbors became my circle. A few of them became more than friends. They became family in the truest sense of the word. We shared meals when money was tight, celebrated small victories, and stood by one another during long nights. Their loyalty wasn't bought or forced. It was real. They showed me the kind of love that never came with conditions. Even while I built this new life, I couldn't completely cut ties in my mind. I never called, never wrote, never showed up at the family home, but I heard things through old acquaintances or people from town. I learned how Gerald's business was doing, how Elaine still trailed behind him at events, how Corinne kept her place in the spotlight. It was like watching a play from the back row, unseen but still aware of every act. The news that reached me one evening nearly stopped me in my tracks. Corinne and Ethan were engaged, not just quietly, but in the most extravagant way possible. They were planning a wedding that people would talk about for years. A huge, lavish celebration with hundreds of guests. The kind of show meant to prove to the world how perfect they were. I sat with the information for a long time, my hands wrapped around a cup of coffee gone cold. They had taken so much from me, and now they were preparing to parade their happiness in front of everyone. But instead of crushing me, the thought settled deep inside like a quiet challenge. They believed I was gone for good. They had written me out of the story. They had no idea how wrong they were. The envelope never came, and I never expected it to. There was no way Corinne and Ethan would want me anywhere near their big day. Still, when the guest list was whispered about in town, when people mentioned the hundreds of names carefully chosen, a small sting burned in my chest. They hadn't only cut me off as family, they had erased me as if I had never existed at all. I might never have known the details if it weren't for someone from my past. Lydia, an old friend from high school, worked at the event hall where the wedding was scheduled. One evening she called me after her shift, her voice low, as if she were sharing a secret. "I thought you should know," she said. "Your sister's wedding is next month. It's going to be huge. Everyone who's anyone will be there." She gave me the date and the place without hesitation. She knew I hadn't been invited. She also knew I deserved to decide what to do with that knowledge. After the call, I sat alone for a long time, staring at the wall. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to keep living my life without stepping back into that poisonous circle. Another part of me burned with something deeper. Not revenge exactly, but the need to be seen. They had told the world I was nothing. They had convinced themselves I was gone. If I stayed away, they would win. The idea of showing up scared me. I imagined the whispers, the stares, the anger in my father's eyes. I pictured Corinne's fake smile cracking when she saw me walk in, Ethan shifting uncomfortably at her side. My stomach twisted at the thought of it, but underneath the nerves, something steadier grew. This wasn't about crashing their day for the sake of ruining it. It was about reclaiming the truth of my own existence. I was alive. I had survived, and they needed to know it. I wrestled with the decision for nights. On one hand, I wanted peace, a life far away from their drama. On the other hand, I couldn't shake the image of them celebrating without a care, as if they had never destroyed me, as if I had never mattered. I realized then that peace would never come from staying silent. I didn't need their approval or their welcome. I needed to stand in front of them and show that I had built a life they never thought I could. By the end of the week, my mind was set. I wasn't going for them. I wasn't going to beg for a place at their table or to prove I belonged. I was going for myself, to close the door on years of pain and finally write my own ending. When the wedding day came, I dressed carefully, not in anything flashy, but in something that made me feel steady and strong. As I looked at myself in the mirror before leaving, I whispered aloud, "You're not going for them. You're going for you." And with that, I stepped out the door. The room was dressed in flowers and candles when I pushed open the door. All eyes were fixed on the front where Corinne and Ethan stood, smiling at one another like they were characters in a fairy tale. The minister had just lifted the book in his hands, his voice rising as he prepared to guide them into their vows. My footsteps broke the rhythm. The sound of the doors creaking drew heads around. At first it was only a few whispers, then the gasps came, one after another, rippling across the rows of chairs. People leaned toward each other, hands raised to mouths, eyes wide. They had heard stories about me, twisted versions passed through gossip, and now here I was, walking down the aisle as if I had been called back from the grave. My father was the first to speak. He stood at the front, stiff in his dark suit, and his face drained of all color the moment he recognized. His mouth opened, and the words fell out louder than he meant. "Why are you still alive?" His voice echoed against the high ceiling, freezing the entire ceremony. Corinne's smile dropped like glass shattering on the floor. She clutched her bouquet tighter, but her arms trembled. The color drained from her cheeks, and for once her perfect composure slipped. Ethan, standing beside her, shifted his weight from foot to foot. He tried to mask it, but guilt was written all over his face, the kind of look a man wears when he knows his lies are about to unravel. My mother sat in the front row, her posture tight, eyes locked on the floor. She didn't look at me, not even once. She folded her hands in her lap, squeezing them until her knuckles turned white. Her silence was louder than words. I stood in the aisle, calm on the outside though my heart thundered in my chest. I didn't need to speak. My presence alone tore apart the illusion they had worked so hard to create. The polished picture of a perfect family, the loyal father, the glowing mother, the adored daughter, crumbled in an instant. Guests turned their heads back and forth, watching the scene play out with disbelief. I took one slow step forward, then another. No one stopped me. It was as though the entire room had forgotten how to move. I saw Corinne's jaw tighten, her lips pressed into a thin line as her eyes flicked over the crowd. She wanted control back, wanted to smooth everything over, but there was no hiding what had already been exposed. The ceremony had been moments from sealing their version of a happy ending. Instead, I had arrived like a storm through open doors, and there was no undoing it. The silence stretched, heavy and raw, the weight of truth pressing down on every corner of the room. Their perfect image was gone, broken in front of everyone who mattered to them, and all I had done was walk in. I stood in the center of the aisle, the silence pressing down so heavy that I could feel the weight of every eye on me. My father's words still lingered in the air, but I wasn't going to let them be the last. For years I had stayed quiet, swallowed the pain, carried the burden alone. Not today. My voice came out steady, stronger than I expected. You all deserve to know what this family hides behind closed doors. Murmurs spread instantly, guests shifting in their seats, unsure if they should look at me or pretend nothing was happening. I didn't give them time to decide. I turned toward Ethan first. This man once promised me love. He told me I was his future. Then he betrayed me with my own sister. Gasps rose, people leaning forward as if they hadn't just seen the proof standing right in front of them. Ethan's face flushed, his jaw tightening as though he wanted to deny it, but the shame in his eyes gave him away. Then I looked at Corinne, and she smiled to my face while stealing the one person I trusted. Manipulation comes as easy to her as breathing. You see her standing here in white, but I know the truth. She's built her life by stepping on others, and I was the first body beneath her feet. Corinne's shoulders stiffened, and her smile cracked completely. She tried to interrupt, but I didn't let her. I turned last to my father. And you, Gerald, you disowned me. You told me I was dead to you because I wouldn't play the role you want. You cut me out, not because I failed you, but because I refused to keep quiet about your golden child's cruelty. The room stirred, guests exchanging glances, whispers darting from one end to the other. The polished image of the proud father, the perfect daughter, the happy couple, it was gone. Faces twisted with discomfort, some with pity, others with judgment. I let the silence after my words hang, heavy and undeniable. Corinne broke first. She threw her bouquet to the floor, her voice shrill as it cracked through the room. She's lying. She's always been jealous of me, always trying to ruin everything. You don't know what she's capable of. Her words tumbled out faster, her face red, eyes wild. She looked less like a bride and more like a child caught in a tantrum. The harder she screamed, the more the guests leaned back, pulling away from her. Ethan tried to grab her arm, to calm her, but she yanked away. For the first time, doubt flickered openly on his face. His lips parted, his eyes scanning the crowd, searching for some kind of anchor. What he found instead was judgment. Everyone had heard enough to know the truth. He looked at me briefly, and I saw it. The crack in his mask, the realization that maybe he had chosen wrong. I didn't raise my voice again. I didn't need to. Corinne's outburst and Ethan's silence did more than I ever could. The truth was no longer mine to prove. It was alive in that room, undeniable and unforgettable. I didn't wait for the minister to regain control, or for anyone to gather their words. I turned, lifted my chin, and walked out the same way I had come in. My heels tapped against the floor in slow, steady rhythm, each step measured, each step mine. I didn't glance back at Corinne or Ethan or my parents. I left them frozen in their perfect hall, their guests staring at them instead of me. My head was high, my back straight. I hadn't gone there to beg or to plead. I had gone to show that I was alive, and I had done exactly that. Life after that moment unfolded without me needing to interfere. The first news reached me only weeks later. The wedding never happened. Ethan, faced with the cracks that had been exposed in front of everyone, called it off. He slipped out of Corinne's grip and left her standing with an empty ring finger and no groom to parade around. People in town whispered about it for months. Some said he had doubts all along. Others said the confrontation had shaken him awake. Whatever the reason, Corinne was left humiliated, her fairy tale ending ripped apart before it began. My father didn't escape either. Word spread fast about what he had shouted in that wedding hall, about how he had disowned his own daughter, and then reacted as if he had seen a ghost. Business partners began to question him. Neighbors pulled away. The image he had spent decades building, that of a proud, respectable man, was gone. People no longer admired him. They pitted him. Some even despised him. I didn't have to say a word. His own cruelty had done the work for me. Elaine was the only one who tried to reach out. A letter arrived one evening, her handwriting shaky, her words full of regret. She admitted she had been weak, that she had looked away when she should have stood up for me. She wrote that she thought of me every day, that she wished things had been different. I read the letter twice and then set it aside. Her regret was real, I could see that, but it came too late. She hadn't stood beside me when I needed her most. I didn't reply. Some doors, once closed, stay closed. As for me, I kept moving forward. Work filled my days, friends filled my evenings. My circle of chosen family grew stronger. Birthdays were celebrated, holidays were shared, and laughter finally came without guilt attached. I rented an apartment filled with sunlight and plants. I traveled on short trips, took pictures, and allowed myself small joys. I no longer carried the weight of being unwanted. Looking back, I realized I never needed revenge. I hadn't needed to plot or scheme. By surviving, by building a life, I had already won. The rest fell into place on its own. Corinne lost her chance at her perfect story. Gerald lost the reputation he prized above everything, and Elaine was left to wrestle with her silence. Karma had done what I never could, And in the quiet of my own life, surrounded by people who truly cared, I found peace. Do you think Marin finally got the justice she deserved? Please share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to read them. A new story is on the way, so don't forget to subscribe, turn on notifications, like, and share. Thank you so much for watching and supporting. God bless you all, and I'll see you in the next one.